want to talk about Shedeur Sanders anymore. I have sold my stock, but now we have a reaction to the multiple speeding violations. He went over 100 miles an hour and got busted. We found out either before or after that. He also got busted for going 91. It's just dangerous. It's just dumb to drive that fast. And no, I've never driven 100 miles an hour. I don't think it's that hard because I don't want to end up, blowing up somebody's car. Bad things happen when you drive that fast. So the stories came out yesterday. Shedeur Sanders had, I made some bad choices. There's body cam footage. There's a column today. The Browns could cut him for less than speeding tickets. So I have no doubt in my mind that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski would strongly consider cutting him if he was not a quarterback. And if not, the owner wanted him drafted. So Jimmy Haslam's a bad owner. 13 years, last place 8 times. That's hard to do in this league. It is hard to do in that league. Did you ever hear that story? I got to read this story to you. This is a true story. Cleveland spent many hours and resources scouting Teddy Bridgewater. In one particular case, an analytical study of quarterbacks cost the team $100,000, told them, draft Bridgewater. Jimmy Haslam became convinced that fans in Cleveland wanted Manziel after, I'm reading this, a homeless man said to the owner, draft Manziel. That's why you have 8 last place finishes. He's impulsive. He's arguably the worst owner. Now that Dan Snyder's out, he's the worst owner. And he wanted this draft pick. We all saw the reaction of Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski when the draft pick was made. They couldn't hide their lack of enthusiasm. So I'm kind of fascinated. How's he dealing with this? Because he whiffed on Manziel. Deshaun Watson, he acknowledged it's a league embarrassment. Baker Mayfield was the best of those picks by far, but he wasn't quite mature enough. So once again, the impulsive owner and the bad owner gets in the way of success. So, and I said this yesterday, he's not mature enough to be a star franchise quarterback. We had questions whether Shedeur Sanders was good enough. Now I know he's not mature enough. But can we stop with the pandering and the straw man arguments? Here's one of the straw man arguments. Colin, it's not the worst thing in the world. Who said it is? We're not asking him to be thrown in jail. No, nobody's saying it's the worst thing in the world. But there are jobs, and this may be unfair, where you need to be really mature at 23 years old, man or woman. Doctor. Sorry, can't come in with a hangover before 4 big surgeries. Right? There are just jobs where we need you to be a grown-up. So don't tell me it's not the end of the world. Nobody's saying it's the end of the world. Here's the other thing. Bro, I've driven 100 miles an hour many times. Yeah, dude, you work at Chipotle. You are not a potential quarterback for a $6 billion franchise. Okay, Jaden Daniels is the starting quarterback. Jobs are on the line with Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. They're on the line. So I don't care that you drove 100 miles an hour, which I would never recommend, and I never have. I've gotten a speeding ticket 30 years ago, but, part of being a quarterback is kind of this unfair reality that you got to be more mature sooner than your buddies. So I don't want to hear about you driving 100 miles an hour. Even if you have a good job, you're not a quarterback of a $6 billion franchise. Even if you got a job as an attorney, you're not a partner at 23 years old. Even if you got a job, you're an intern to be a doctor, you're not the chief of staff. Man, you're chief of staff, you're quarterback in the NFL. That is a big boy job. So guys saying it's not the worst thing in the world, we do not see it is. And I've done it 100 times. You're not vying to be a quarterback in the NFL. And so I've said this for years. I don't love the Wonderlic test and all that stuff, but there's a reason you do these interviews. Will Levis turned some people off during interviews. Shedeur Sanders reportedly turned some people off during interviews. That's why they do them. They've seen your tape. They've seen you move. They've seen your arm. They've seen your touchdowns. Can you be a franchise quarterback? Again, if he's driving 100 miles an hour and he's a cornerback or a Mike linebacker, I don't love it. But I wrote about this in my first book. It's different. Certain jobs get the corner office. It's like when there's a difference. I hear this argument all the time from people at the other network, especially. It's hey, coaches leave. Why can't players leave? Transfer portal. First of all, coaches in Power 5 conferences, football coaches, don't leave that much. They're often fired. They don't leave very much. Secondly, a coach is different than a player. A player is 19 years old. A coach is 50. A coach is responsible at the college level for everybody in the program, himself, his staff, the kids. A player is responsible for himself. They're not equals. The bosses at Fox get pension plans. I don't, nor should I. My boss, Eric Shanks, is responsible for everybody in the sports department. I'm responsible for this microphone, all right? I shouldn't get what they get. Okay, so that's the way I look at quarterback. Of all the players on a football team, it's just way more important. It's just, you're a gunner on special teams. We're not building around you. Even a great running back. Derrick Henry. Titans loved him. They're like, yeah, we're going to move off him. You don't move off elite quarterbacks very often. Derrick Henry, they're like, we don't want to pay him. Giants, Saquon Barkley, we're not sure. We're going to let him go to a rival. You're not doing that. You're not letting Jalen Hurts next year go to the Giants, right? Like, quarterback's different. So before you rush to say it's not the end of the world, nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying that. Secondly, dude, me and my buddies do it all the time. For any infraction, doesn't matter. That's not relative to what quarterback, and it's unfair. I've said before, it's unfair how mature you have to be at 23. I wasn't mature enough to be an NFL quarterback at 21, 22 years old. I got there about 54 years old. Okay, so I know it's hard and I know it's unfair. But those two arguments are silly. And I don't care what random dude does. I don't think anybody should drive 100 miles an hour or 90.
Okay. You know what's a shame here? This is actually an awesome take from Colin. And it's actually takes like this that really inspired me and motivated me to want to do what I'm doing here on this channel. That made me be like, we can talk sports, we can break this all down, and then we can also have these other layers to these conversations. And it's why Colin Cowherd's my favorite, the Herd. I'm not going to act like he has the best takes and they're the most accurate takes of all time. And when he thinks that this team is going to beat that team or whatever, but it's just like, this is why to me, Colin personally is undefeated. Because I think a take like this is actually accurate, grounded, and not just, 4 clicks or 4 views. It's just, it's actually what he truly believes, and it's passionate, but not in this extreme, grandiose, over the top way. And you can disagree with it, that's fine, but it's really 100% accurate. And it is fair in terms of saying, oh, it's not fair with, that we ask these guys to be so mature, because they get paid so much money and they get to live one of the most amazing lives that you can live. Are you kidding me? When I was 23, I was not on a football field for the Cleveland Browns, the Eagles. I was not, having this whole future ahead of me where it's like, I get to play ball right now and I get paid and I'm going to be in the NFL. It is one of the most extraordinary experiences you could ever imagine. So it's the trade-off. And, I all the comments that Colin is talking about, that's what I'm reading in the comment section too, right? It's like, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal, and I've gone 100 miles, so who cares? Some guy was like, in Texas, you could drive 90 or whatever, and it's like, cool. Is this Texas? You are breaking a law. And so I've been referencing the Rehab a lot recently, but this is actually a spot-on comparison. So as you guys know, I worked at a men's inpatient rehab facility with just the most intense demographic, and the poorest, most intense demographic, people coming from just backgrounds that could, make you cry, scream, every emotion under the sun. So this was not like a bunch of, rich people getting massages and swimming in a pool here. This was in the middle of nowhere, rural, poor, dilapidated. And, you have rules, you have a schedule, 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m., this, that. And, they'd have rules, and during the day, you can't really snack. You can only eat, there would be some fruit out there. You can only have caffeine-free coffee in the morning and throughout the day, because it could give them extra anxiety that we didn't want. And they would struggle with that, but you could have coffee at certain, meetings and whatnot. And we had a collection of rules that were pretty basic and very elementary. And some of these guys, because you're talking about grown men who would be like, what the heck? Why can't I have, coffee? Why can't I have this? I'm a grown man. If I want to eat something at 1 o'clock, then I'm going to do it, or, this or that. And it's just like, you're in rehab. You're either coming from jail, you're either, whatever it is. Your life is a disaster right now. No one who's living a great life finds themselves in rehab. And the sheer fact that you're struggling to follow basic elementary rules that we can get 8-year-olds to do, and you're struggling to understand why it's not appropriate for you to walk into the kitchen and steal, literally, you're at this point, you'd be stealing a cookie. And it's like, yeah, it's just a cookie. I get it. But if you can't just not eat that cookie at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you really think you're going to be able to go out and not drink, not do other harder stuff? Like, you really think so? If you can't even just not eat this cookie, I remember one of the guys that I worked with who was like a, grown man and been in there for, 20 plus years. He's like, it's not, and he was yelling. He's like, it's not the point about the cookie. It is just a cookie, but that's not the point. It's not your cookie. And it's true. It's like, it's not yours. And so you can't follow this simple, basic rule here. Why do you think you're going to be able to follow the actual serious stuff out there then? And that's it. And that to me is what it showed me with Shedeur here. Where it's like, he got 2 speeding tickets in 1 month. The fact that after you got 1 ticket that you weren't like, all right, I got to be a little bit more careful here. That's why they gave a point system. Because really wealthy people could just keep speeding, and it's like, whatever, I don't care. Most of the time I don't get caught, and when I do get caught, it's a couple $100, whatever, that's nothing, I'm rich. And they're like, all right, we got to have a point system here. And so, it's like, there's times that I've, one time I accidentally drove without my license. And it was just like, because I wasn't expecting driving, and, I had to drive my mom somewhere. I forget exactly what the circumstance was. But I was wearing, like, shorts and, like, a Ram tee. I just wasn't ready to drive. And the cop pulled me over and was like, license. And I was like, I don't have it. And, he wanted to give me a ticket. And I was like, please, I'm so sorry. I wasn't planning on driving, this, that, and the third. And he was really nice. We had a conversation about it. And, since then, I've never, even if I was going out a minute away, just down the street real fast, like whatever it is, get food, always have my license on me. Always, 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 always. And it was like, because I learned. And, and it's like, I wanted to change. And if you're someone who got a speeding ticket, if you're now the type of person who's now not going to drive more carefully when you're driving, like, that is a problem. That is showing me that you're not learning, that you're not growing, that you're not maturing, that your literal mistakes of your past, you're now not applying the lessons that you learned. Like, that is a problem. That is you either just not having the self-awareness or you fundamentally not caring. That is a problem. That is a problem. It just is. And so people can say, well, what does that have anything to do with anything about being a quarterback? Everything. Everything. Being a quarterback is not just being awesome on the field. And I got news for you. You need to be a great person in a lot of ways to be great on the field in football as a quarterback. Because of all the work that you need to do. All the lessons that you need to learn. All the film that you need to break down, the conversations that you need to have with multiple coaches, multiple players. In a lot of ways, you need to be a great employee, but also a great CEO. Like what Colin's talking about here, where, between his boss and him and how he only has to worry about the mic and how his boss has to worry about all this other stuff. In a lot of ways, being a quarterback is having Colin's job and the job of his boss. Because you need to be great at the mic. You need to have the great takes. You need to have the energy. You need to be charming, funny, intelligent, this, that. And you need to be the boss pulling all these strings, doing this, that, and the third. Having all the the sleepless nights. You need to hop on a jet and fly across the world because of some sort of, issue going down. That is what a quarterback has to do. A quarterback has to do it all. All. There's so much at stake here. And right, there's billions of dollars at stake. Billions of dollars. And insane amount of people's jobs. People who live ordinary lives. People who are not rich and famous. People who you will never know the names of or even see them. Their jobs are at stake. Not just a GM, not just a coach, but so many other people who just live ordinary, regular old lives, but they work within, an NFL team. So, like, all of this stuff does matter. Of course it matters. And right, it's not the worst thing. Because people were talking about, other people, Rashee Rice or this, that. And it's like, right, he was lucky. There wasn't a car crash. Nobody was in danger. He wasn't intoxicated. That's true. But that's when people do this whole black and white thinking, this all or nothing thinking, where it's like, you criticize a father for being too hard on their son, and they're like, yeah, well, there's fathers who aren't even around. And it's like, okay, you're right, and that's awful, but that doesn't mean that we can't talk about this specific situation. People talked about that, I remember, years ago, and it was on the real Speak for Yourself with Witt and Marcellus Wiley, and I think they had a bunch of other people there for this specific segment. And it was LeBron James and his son, and it was when his son was in high school, and LeBron James, like, something happened, and he made himself a big part of the moment. And people were kind of criticizing him, and they were like, listen, this is about his son. Is LeBron James doing too much? And people were like, do you know how many fathers aren't involved in their sons' lives? Like, do you know how an amazing father LeBron James is? And it's like, no one's saying that LeBron James is inherently a bad father. No one's saying that it's not awful that there's so many fathers that just don't exist in people's lives. That LeBron James didn't have a father figure, really. It's like, no one's saying that. Like it's a straw man argument. We can still talk about this specific situation. And I talk about this all the time when we're talking about just like pure football. I'm like, let's talk about this game right here. Patrick Mahomes did bad. Let's defend Justin Herbert. And people are always like, well, they always want to jump to 2018, 2019, 2021. And it's just like, all of that is true. What this quarterback did in 2021 or what Tom Brady did in 2007 or whatever, like, that's all true. But that has nothing to do with this immediate moment. This specific game. And it's just like, people love to kind of just go left, right, up, down. And it's always trying to be like, no. Like, let's focus on this conversation here. And people often just hear what they want to hear. The last time I made the Shedeur Sanders video on this, on the speeding ticket, it's like, I defended him in a lot of ways. I really did. And then you had other people kind of coming and being like, not coming at me as I don't want to act like that video I had a lot of people come at me, but a few people did. And again, I've had a lot worse, and I'm all for it. Bring it on. That's why I always say, let's get into some fights. Let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But it was just kind of like, you're not really listening to what I'm saying, are you? Like, I'm not saying this is the biggest deal. But, like, we have to unpack what some of this means. And, you have to understand what your actions mean when they matter to so many people. And I think it's more concerning that you get a ticket like this and then that your behavior has not changed within the same month. The fact that you're not going to be like, I got to be careful. I got to make sure that I'm going to, drive the speed limit. Even if it only lasts for a month or two and you go back to your old ways. The fact that it didn't even last a month, I find the most, it's like if you break up with someone and you're like, I'm going to be on my best behavior. Please, let's get back together. Please, let's get back together. Usually you're on your best behavior for like at least a few weeks, at least a month. And you really hate each other and you really shouldn't be back together if you can't even last that. Because I remember I got back together with an ex and I was like, everything's going to be different. And it was like, nope, I really do not like you. We are not good together. And it was like, I couldn't even last like 2 days without wanting to be like, oh my God, I gotta just go away. I gotta go away forever. And it's like that highlighted a fundamental problem that I couldn't just grin and bear it for more than 2 days. And that's the equivalent of this right now. And it's concerning. And like I keep saying, being a football player, being a quarterback is more than just being a great athlete. Being able to throw the ball, being able to read defenses. That is why you have all these interviews. This is why you have all these conversations. This is why things like intelligence matter. Maturity matters. It's just the reality. It just is. So, yeah, it's an unfortunate situation. I'm not going to use this. And again, I've already casted my doubt on Shedeur. And I'm not, and in some ways, this speaks to some of the concerns that I had with regards to them, or adds an example of why I am so personality driven in that regard and character driven. But I'm also not going to use these instances as a way to be like, see, I told you, this is what the problem is. This is why he's not going to work. Like, I'm not doing that victory lap. I mean, think about it. I had been hard on Shedeur Sanders. I've been hard on him. And yet this is the perfect time to do a victory lap. This is the perfect time for me to be like, I told you this, and I'm not doing that. I'm discussing the issue. I'm discussing the way how I see it, how it impacts, being a quarterback or, success in general. But I'm also not going to be like, see, this is why he's going to be bad. This is why he's not going to work. I'm more interested in seeing what he does from here. And I think the fact that his dad, obviously being such a huge force, that also plays a factor. And I don't know what his dad tells him in these moments. I'm sure his dad can't be happy about this specifically, but any of the other issues that he's kind of had throughout his life or, throughout the draft process, I don't know if his dad's like, feeding into him, that was all nonsense. You should have never dropped. Who, what the Giants said are wrong, this, that. Like, I don't know what he's saying. Or if he's like saying, hey, do you see what happened here? This is a learning experience. This is why you got to be careful how you present yourself. This is why you got to do X, Y, and Z. There's nothing's given, this, that. Or if he's like, you're going to prove them all wrong. They're going to be upset that they ever did, that they ever doubted you. Like, I don't know what lessons that he's being taught here. I really don't. And so in this moment, it's just like, it's hard to defend something like this. Quite frankly, there's like, it's because it's not a matter of an opinion. Like this is a matter of a reality. So yeah, I'm more interested to see how he moves forward. I'm always open. I always leave people the opportunity to make mistakes, to make really bad mistakes, quite frankly. And I look more to be like, well, what do you do moving forward? And so it's going to be interesting. But it is so fun. It is fascinating to see so many people defend this and act like this is nothing or not a big deal. And they're like, oh, it's only because it's Shedeur. Someone said, do you know how many people probably speed in the NFL right now? And it's like, that makes it better? And are they all quarterbacks? Yeah, Patrick Mahomes got 2 speeding tickets in a month and it was reported. Yeah, a lot of people would be concerned. That's just a fact. That's just a fact. But you're right. If the third string running back on the Carolina Panthers, the Tennessee Titans had a speeding ticket, you're right. Nobody would really care. And the level of that that running back's popularity, how much he gets paid, how much the team cares about him, how much the NFL cares about him, how much the fans care about him, how much the world unfortunately cares about him, is highlighted there. Shedeur Sanders is not that person. So if you want to hold Shedeur Sanders to that same standard, that's a weird thing to do, man. That's a weird thing to do. It's like the people that say, well, why, you're making excuses for Sam Darnold. Why not Patrick Mahomes? He dealt with a lot of pressure too. And it's like, we're putting Sam Darnold and Patrick Mahomes on the same standard? Really? That's what we're doing here? I hold Patrick Mahomes to a higher standard. I expect Patrick Mahomes to be able to deal with blitzes and pressures more efficiently than Sam Darnold. Yes, I know. It's crazy. You're right. Like, I love when people come up with that comeback because it's like, what are you talking about right now? You want me to hold Patrick Mahomes to the same standard of Kirk Cousins? If you want to do that, well, then you're saying that Patrick Mahomes isn't great and elite and an all-time special talent. That's a weird take to have. That's what people are doing here with Shedeur Sanders. It's like, okay, so you want to say that he's not a massive deal. You want to say that he's not supposed to be a great quarterback. Because the people that believe in Shedeur Sanders to be in a special, and they believe that he's going to be a top quarterback in the NFL, well, then he's held to that standard. And if you don't want to hold him to that standard, well, then you don't think he's that great then. And go make sense of that. Go untie that knot, because you can't. Those are just my thoughts as I get sicker and sicker. I am sick, and Colin's sick. I can hear it in his nose. We all got it. Those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about Shedeur Sanders now, especially that it's been reported that he's got not 1, but 2. Dude's got more speeding tickets than interceptions right now. Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.